Hi, and welcome to Making the Strange, a podcast about how we made our fiction podcast. We will take you along with us in real time as we create our fiction podcast. I'm Jennifer, the writer and creator of the Strange Chronicles.
And I'm Chris, the producer of the Strange Chronicles, a sci-fi noir detective podcast.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about what it takes to write a fiction podcast.
We'll also discuss a technical magic that happened along the way, and something we hope will help you. And in our How's the Writing Going segment, Jennifer will discuss how the writing is going.
And finally, we'll provide a podcast tip, something that you can use as a strategy for your own podcast.
All right, first a quick rundown of this podcast and why we're making it.
Yes, well, Making the Strange is kind of a way that we're chronicling our experience of making our fiction podcast. It's an experiment. We have no idea what we're doing.
It's also a way to keep us motivated and on task, so hopefully you can follow along and see that if it's something you'd like to do, and if we can do it, then you certainly can too.
Exactly. If you have any questions or comments regarding making a fiction podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at info@thestrangechronicles.com. And we'll be sure to include questions in a future episode. Okay, it's time for our technical mishap or magic, and today is a magic. So Chris, tell us something magical that's happened.
Okay, today's magic is the music. Technically, not technical. It was kind of a creative endeavor for me. I had a lot of fun doing it. Music is super intimidating. I am not a musician by any means, but I like music a lot. I listen to a lot of music. I have friends that make music, and I know what I like. So I dove headfirst into Apple's GarageBand on both my computer and my iPad. Just a little bit of note on the technical side. The two files, for some reason, are not compatible. So if you record a file on GarageBand on your laptop or computer, and then record a file on your iPad or iPhone, because they have the app on both iOSs or single iOSs, both devices. Anyway, you can't play them on the other device.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, super weird, right? You can export the file and then, make it a WAV or whatever, an MP3, however you want to export it. And then in that way, you can listen to it on either device. But the actual GarageBand file is not cross-compatible.
Huh.
So I did it on both. I think I started on the laptop. I made the intro to the show on the laptop. And again, don't play instruments, don't read music, but I love it. And I started messing around in there with all the instruments that they do have. There's so many. Like, you can pick all sorts of stuff. They have strings, they have percussion. They have the synth, which is my favorite. I love a good synth. And you can just start messing around, and there's so many intuitive, easy to use tools that if you just have an idea of a sound that you want to try to achieve, I feel like you can kind of do it with a base level of nothing.
What inspired the music for this? What did you listen to get inspired to make the intro?
I don't know that I listened to anything. I definitely, as we've talked about this show a lot, X-Files comes up as a big inspiration. And I wanted to do something along that line. I'm not that creative genius where I can make something that's so like such a good earworm and so simple. The beauty of that thing is it's just so simple. But I definitely wanted to do, I wanted to do something with sort of a throwback to the past, even though we're in the future. I just feel like everything in my brain that identifies future revolves around a little bit of synth,
That's very 80s of you.
It's super 80s and I love it.
But did we also listen to intros of other podcasts, and I was playing some for you?
Yeah, you did a lot of that, and you gave me a lot of
idea.
background information as to don't make it this and don't do that, and it has to be this
keep it
length,
shorter.
and keep it shorter.
Yeah,
which I definitely had to do, and I tried a couple of different ones that I threw in there, and we threw it out there to some of our friends to listen to as well, and they had some good ideas as far as placement and when to time things out, but I had a lot of fun. The other thing GarageBand does is it has 1 million loops, and they are really high quality. And I used a lot of those to varying degrees, and I mixed and matched things. And
Yeah, it sounds great. I would never guess that you don't have a musical background.
Well, I don't, but I love it. And maybe in another life, I can go be a musician.
So if you are looking to make a theme song for your fiction podcast, consider looking into GarageBand. I know there are a bunch of other ways to make music on the computer. There's other software and stuff.
There's some fun stuff you can get into out there. There's like AI creating music. I forgot what the website is, but you can go in and basically like pick a few parameters and say, AI, make me a song, and it makes this weird like but it's musical. Some of it's a little out there, but music is music. It's hitting notes.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that you can channel your creativity in that way.
Next up, we're going to discuss how the writing is going. So, Jen, how is the writing going?
Well, this is the writing episode, so we'll get into a deeper chat in a moment, but the update on writing the podcast is it's going fine. I have multiple episodes ready to record and still more ideas, which is a good place to be. And I think it helps that it's summertime, so there's more space for that. So my verdict on the writing for now is all good. It's all good.
That's great. So now that we know that the writing is going well, can you dive a little deeper into the actual process of writing?
Yes. Well, this is the writing episode. So this is just a basic rundown of how I wrote the episodes of the story. The writing of a fiction podcast is going to depend on the length and aim of your story. So I tend to write stories on the shorter side in general. So our episodes are about 10 to 15 pages long, which comes out to about 15 to 20 minutes for the episodes. An important thing for the writing is how to frame your story. What is the engine that pushes it along and makes more episodes? So in our case, with the Strange Chronicles, the podcast is told as case logs. So our main character is a detective who investigates supernatural crimes, usually starting with a missing person. Each episode is a mystery, so there will be a through line with the main characters, and then each mystery is a standalone. If you keep the main character list short, you'll have an easier time recording.
Is there anything you would have done differently?
Great question. Definitely, I would have had all of the episodes written before jumping in with the recording. I had planned to do that originally, and I do have a full outline of the episodes, but having enough time for all the writing and recording and editing is proving to be a challenge. It's a surmountable challenge, and, making this podcast is helpful, to keep it going. But it's definitely a pressure that I could have avoided if I had done all of the scripts before we started.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it by yourself, you're not gonna save any time by writing and recording and doing that all at the same time. But I think when you have another person helping you, you can write and the other person can do all the posts and do all the editing.
Which was our plan. I think that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think it helps keep things moving along a little faster rather than, waiting for one thing to be finished before you can start the next. We can sort of do them simultaneously.
Yeah. I mean, and that's how it's going. It's going okay that way. But if I had just like a nice stack of scripts, Brandon Sanderson style, that I could just plop down on a desk.
So I wrote a book. Boom. And then I wrote another book.
Sorry, we're
Boom.
Referring to the Kickstarter
then I wrote another book.
Video. If
Boom.
You haven't seen that, Brandon Sanderson so famously made like $1 bazillion on Kickstarter by writing 4 books over the summer or over COVID.
Over COVID.
Yeah.
His it was brilliant. His little
that was funny.
Kickstarter I just loved it.
So yeah, I wish that I had it all fully done, but I have a lot of other work that I'm doing at the same time. So getting in the characters' heads when you're doing another job and you're as the writer in their head, it was hard to jump back and forth. But luckily for right now, I'm solidly, no, that's not true because I'm revising something else. But I was going to say, when I'm working on the podcast, I'm solidly in Gray's head. It's kind of a trippy thing to be jumping around from projects. So I do wish I'd done them all, but at this point, I'll just be so grateful if I can finish this all by our launch date of Halloween. So
woo. Better get a move on. I better get a move on. All right, so what's your best advice on writing a fiction podcast? You're a multi-medium writer. You write, scripts, you write books, Now you're writing a podcast. Are there differences between those mediums? Like if someone thinks, some author wants to go do their own podcast, or someone wants to switch from doing screenwriting, are there any tips?
I guess a tip could be, I think I mentioned in the story episode that choosing a popular genre is helpful. I have no idea how the story will be received, so my advice on doing this is pertains to my experience. But no matter what story you want to tell, no matter if it checks the right boxes, what's really the most important thing is for you to tell it, to finish. I would say as far as mediums, like different mediums of writing, sure, they all have different structures and different rules, but forget rules, just write the thing, I'm probably breaking a lot of rules with the podcast and scripts and, book stuff. I think the most important thing is to write the thing, and then you can fix, once the thing is a thing, you can fix it, you can shape it, you can make it better. I think writing is always really in the revision. It's that blank page that kind of gets you. I just think that it's really important to get through all the cobwebs of doubt and make sure that you're doing the writing. Start something today, even if it changes tomorrow. But if you start something, you'll be making a fiction podcast. Like, you are a fiction podcast writer if you write one sentence today on your fiction podcast. So that's my biggest advice. And yeah, sure, if you write other things, that might help you. If you don't write other things and you really want to do this, that's fine too, but yeah, I think it helps to have written before because you have like an innate idea of the 3-act structure or whatever.
So that finishes up the writing bit of the episode. And now it's time for our podcast tip, something we learned to help make your journey easier.
I just alluded to it in the writing section, so the podcast tip for today is just start. Yes, I know it sounds simple, but I think that sometimes when we want to do something creative, it can be easy to talk yourself out of it before you even begin. I mean, this project has been years in the making for us. I've wanted to do a podcast for a very long time. So I say to you, if you want to make it, just start. Open the file, write one word. Write, my podcast is about ... and fill in the blank. My podcast is about whatever you want it to be. Because the tiniest effort to start can be a great motivator to continue. So if you can open the file, write an idea for a fiction podcast, and then tell someone you've started working on a podcast, that energy will maybe make you write sentence number 2 tomorrow. So that's your podcast tip. Just start.
Well, that's it for this episode of Making Strange.
We want to thank you for tuning in to our journey in creating a fiction podcast. We hope it will inspire you to create your own story because we believe that everyone has a story to tell. Please email us with any podcast tips or questions you may have at info@thestrangechronicles.com.
Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Instagram @MakingTheStrange and at the Strange Chronicles podcast.
Please join our email list to get all the latest updates on The Strange Chronicles, a sci-fi detective fiction podcast coming out soon. Until our next episode, I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Chris. Keep it strange.
This has been a Kings of Content production.